Hey guys, please subscribe to Moon's Diary of Literature and turn on the notification bell. Now check out today's video. So today I'll discuss what is Skopos theory and what is equivalence theory in translation studies. So now at first let's start with Skopos theory. So Skopos theory was first introduced in 1978 by Hans J. Vermeer, who is a German theorist, and this theory was first published in a German journal named Lebensbrechen. So, Skopos theory is claimed to be a framework for a general theory of translation. Actually, friends, as translation means the transfer of a word or text written or spoken from one language to another. So, actually, translation is a very complex as well as difficult process. I myself have done translation of a work. Actually, I translated a Bengali work into English, and that is actually a difficult task. And understanding the theories of translation like equivalence theory, Skopos theory, they are quite tricky. So now let's start discussing Skopos theory. So it is a concept from the field of translation studies, and this theory provides an insight into the nature of translation as a purposeful activity. It means that translation is a purposeful activity which is directly applicable to every translation project. Okay. So Skopos theory that was established by German linguist Hans Vermeer, but later it was developed in the hands of Hans Vermeer and Katharina Reis. So in the hands of Vermeer and Reis, this theory was developed itself to be more functional and target reader oriented. Okay. So Skopos theory actually signaled the paradigm shift, okay, from linguistic to functionalism. So Vermeer uses Skopos theory as a distinct technical term and states that any translation is an action and any translation is goal oriented. Thus, any translating action needs to have a purpose. So thus, this theory comprises the idea that translating and interpreting should primarily take into account the function of the target text. It means that here target text is of vital importance because here it says that translating and interpreting should primarily take into account the function of target text. So that's why in this theory, the status of the source text is quite lower than the status of the source text is in equivalence based theories of translation. Okay. So it means that in equivalence theories, the status of the source text is quite higher, and in Skopos theory, apart from the source text, the target text is taken into account highly. So that's why Christian Nord, in translating as a purposeful activity, said that the source is seen in Skopos theory as an offer of information which the translator turns into an offer of information for the target audience. Another theorist named Paul Kussmaul in the book Training the Translator explains Skopos theory as the functional approach has great affinity with Skopos theory. The function of a translation depends on the knowledge, expectations, values, and norms of the target readers, who are again influenced by the situation they are in and by the culture. These factors determine whether the function of the source text or passages in the source text can be preserved or have to be modified or even changed. So, as Skopos means purpose, and Skopos theory provides an insight into the nature of translation as a purposeful activity. So, that's why Vermeer points out three possible types of purposes. Firstly, there is a general purpose that a translator strives for. It means that translating something, it is a source of professional income for a translator. It is one purpose of translation. Secondly, translation is used as a communicative purpose of a target text in a target circumstances. Okay. And the third purpose is the purpose of a translation strategy or approach, such as to exhibit the structural traits of the source language. So there are three purposes. Among the three purposes, the Skopos theory refers to the second type of purpose because this theory treats the source text as an offer of information in a target culture. So from Skopos theory standpoint, it is said that a translation product that is called translatum needs not to have similar functional equivalence to a source text. Okay, and here Vermeer argues that a translator defines the function of the translation product through a translation brief or a translation commission. And the translation brief is an intercultural operative. Thus, within the framework of Skopos theory, the cultural aspects of both source and target language are deeply regarded. Although the theory focuses more toward target culture, but still there is here the cultural aspects of source language is also take seriously. So there are lots of criticism also found in the case of Skopos theory, which is basically based on its definition and its attitude towards source text. Okay, so apart from the criticism, Skopos theory still made a significant contribution in the field of translation studies. So after this, now let's talk about the equivalence theory in translation studies. So actually, friends, equivalence can be said to be the central issue in translation. Its definition, its relevance, its applicability within the field of translation theory have caused heated controversy. Okay, so in this session, I'll try my best to give a most accurate discussion on equivalence. So, while studying equivalence, we have to know Roman Jacobson's view of equivalence, as well as in this session, I will discuss Nida, Tiber, this type of theorists' views on equivalence. Okay. One important thing, friends, in my channel, you will also find other videos on translation studies. I will put the link in the description box. So just check out. Okay. So let's start. So, friends, as equivalence theory is related to translation, that's why you have to at least know that what is this translation. So, translation means transfer of a text or word, written or spoken, from one language to another. It means that transfer of a written word or texts or spoken words from one language to another by maintaining the meaning of the source language or the attitude of the source language to the target language is called translation. So, actually, friends, while doing translation, it is actually hard to find absolutely identical words and notions and cultures in different languages. Okay, and while doing translation, we need one source language and one target language. So, different languages have different phonetic, different grammar system, different syntax, and vocabulary structures. So in that case, there is used the equivalence theory to show the likeness between the source and the target text. Okay, because equivalence generally means balance or equity. One critic or renowned theorist named Catford about equivalence theory states that a central task of translation theory is that of defining the nature and conditions of translation equivalence. So, thus, it is clear that defining equivalence in translation is quite a difficult task. And Roman Jacobson in 1959 first used this term equivalence. Okay. So, various theorists like Roman Jacobson, Baker, Eugene Nida, Catford is of the view that or is of the opinion that equivalence is a literal translation of each word and notion. But this opinion differs from person to person. According to Kenny, equivalence is used for the sake of convenience. Okay, so there are different opinions about the righteousness of equivalence theory. Actually, in the translation process, the factors which actually or mostly affect the human translation is the cultural or linguistic aspects of the source language text as well as the target language text. Okay, so, if these cultural or linguistic parameters are as effective and as accurate as expected, then these parameters will help streamline the translation process in a convincing and correct manner. So, in order to truly achieve translation equivalence, there have to be a striking balance between source text and target text. So, before discussing about Roman Jacobson and his ideas on equivalence, let us now talk about Jean-Paul Vinet and Jean Darbelnet's view or opinion on equivalence. So, in their book, they distinguish between direct and oblique translation. They referred direct translation as literal translation and oblique translation as free translation. And in respect to these, they propose 7 procedures, and they are borrowing, calc, literal translation, transposition, modulation, equivalence, and adaptation. So here equivalence is viewed as a procedure in which the same situation is replicated as in the original, but here different wording is used. So these are the views of Paul Vinay and Jean Doublenet. So now let's talk about Roman Jacobson. So Jacobson believed that equivalence comes in 3 types. One is intralingual, it means that equivalence within one language, it means paraphrasing or rewriting the same content, okay? Then interlingual, it means equivalence between languages or 2 languages. And lastly, we have intersemiotic, it means equivalence between sign systems. So, among these 3 types of equivalence by Jacobson, the second type means the intralingual. This is the one where translation equivalence is classified in. So after this, we have another theory on equivalence, that is by Eugene Nida and Taiber. So according to them, there are 2 types of equivalence. One is formal and the other one is dynamic. So formal equivalence can be understood as a word for word translation. Okay, so it means that translating the meaning of words and phrases in a more literal way to one language to another. And on the other hand, dynamic equivalence means a sense for sense translation. It means that translating the meanings of phrases or whole sentences into one language to another language with readability in mind. So, in a more accurate sense, formal equivalence, this approach actually tends to emphasize fidelity to the lexical details and grammatical structure of the original language. Okay, where dynamic equivalence tends to employ a more natural rendering but with less literal accuracy. It means that in formal equivalence, there you will find the most accurate literal fidelity, and in the dynamic equivalence, you will find less literal accuracy. So, Eugene Nida argues that in formal equivalence, the target text resembles very much to the source text in both form and content. Whereas in dynamic equivalence, there an effort is made to convey the source text message in the target text as naturally as possible. Eugene Nida also subscribed to the dynamic equivalence, but in later years, he distanced himself from the term dynamic equivalence, and then he preferred the term functional equivalence as best. So apart from them, we have Anton Popovich's view on equivalence. So he describes 4 kind of equivalence. One is linguistic, other one is paradigmatic, other one is stylistic, and the last one is textual equivalence. So friends, these are the views on equivalence theory by various theorists. I hope that this video will help you, and if yes, then please give it a like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. So bye for now, see you in the next session very soon.